Conversation not recording. All right.
I'm recording to the cloud, so I'm assuming it'll go to your cloud.
It should. Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
it should. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this conversation around healing. I have Janel Cubbage and Brandon Johnson here with me. My name is Letrice Gant. I also go by LNG, so you may hear people refer to me as either or. I am one of the co-organizers for the Baltimore Ceasefire 365 movement. I'm part of the squad, which is the leadership portion of the movement itself. We are now into the August 2022 ceasefire weekend. We're into day 3, and this is the 5th anniversary of when we've called a ceasefire. And so I met Janel a while ago, having conversations around community collaboration, and she and we met online, and then we met in person. And I thought it was, when we got finished talking, the conversation was so amazing to me. And it was so good that I thought other people need to be here for this. And so we thought about doing an event during Ceasefire Weekend around healing and ideas and misconceptions that people have around healing and wellness. And Janel suggested that we invite Brandon Johnson. And so I'm going to turn over the mic to Janel to give her an opportunity to introduce herself, and then she'll turn it over to Brandon so that he can introduce himself too.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Janel Cubbage. I am the Strategic Partnerships and Equity Program Manager at Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions. And I'm also trained as a trauma therapist. So I have a private practice where I primarily work with Black women healing trauma called Ubuntu Healing Collective. So my background is in trauma and mental health as well as public health. So very excited to be here with my brother, Brandon Johnson. So I'll turn it over to Brandon for him to introduce himself.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, and thanks, Janel, for the opportunity to be a part of this. I'm Brandon Johnson. I am born and raised Baltimore City boy, so I want to put that out there for sure. Grew up in West Baltimore, but love all parts of Baltimore just the same. And so my background is really just similar to Janel. I work in the mental health and public health space. I work particularly in suicide prevention with a focus in suicide prevention among communities of color, particularly Black children. On top of that, I have a YouTube page called the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, which if you go just look us up on YouTube, Black Mental Wellness Lounge, we talk about all things mental health related specifically to the Black community. I've had Janel on. I've had so many other Black therapists, Black psychologists, community members, people who've lost individuals to suicide. And, really we just get a good conversation about what mental health is to us. What does it mean to us? And the unique barriers and challenges that we have in terms of, racism and discrimination and historical trauma, all sorts of things like that. But we unpack that and we talk about healing. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you both so much. So along with conversations around staying well, I want to ask you both the question from a both personal and professional perspective. How do you define wellness?
Sure. I mean, I can kick us off. Really, for me, wellness is all encompassing, right? It's a sense of well-being that the things and the different parts of our lives that make us are well taken care of. We feel good about the needs and the boundaries that we've set are being met. And I have my basic needs to feel that everything is taken care of in these different areas. So we're talking, in the physical sense, like, am I safe? Do I feel comfortable? Am I at ease? Can I relax? Can I, can I rest in this space where I'm at, like physically? And I think there's another bucket of mentally and emotionally, like, do I feel, loved? Do I feel protected? Do I feel cared for? Do I feel that the things that are important to me are taken care of? For many of us, there's a spiritual aspect of that as well. Like, am I comforted? Am I doing the things connected to my purpose? Do I know what my purpose is, right? Like, do I have that connection there where I can seek refuge somewhere else as well? And so it's those different things like coming together where I'm like, yes, like I feel safe, secure, love, like all those things coming together and working in concert together, that I have this place of this is wellness. So that's why I always say like wellness is so individualized, right? It's my wellness may not be your wellness. If I'm like an introvert and I'm like, I have time and able to get to myself, then I feel like I have a sense of wellness. If I'm an extrovert, which I kind of lean a little bit towards the extrovert side, like, am I connecting to my people that I can like be around those energies, those people, those spirits that really give me what I need to keep going. So I think it's a very individualized thing, but that's kind of how I would put it.
Okay, thank you, Janelle.
I would agree with all of that and add on, am I upholding my boundaries and being true to myself to be able to cultivate those areas of wellness in my life? So I can't remember her name, but she's on Twitter and she has this quote that I love: guard your yes with your life. I think that we often sign up for things that excite us and probably do fulfill us, but we can easily overfill our plate really quickly. And I think being really intentional about choosing what we do expend our energy on is also a part of wellness and maintaining our wellness. And I also think it's really important. I think there's this misconception that healing or being well means that everything is going well in my life. And I constantly talk to my clients about this. Listen, if I could make life stop life in the way that it does, like I would be able to solve a lot of problems, but that just ain't the case. I don't have the magic key. I don't have the magic pill to do that. But a lot of the work that we do focuses on you being able to cope when life throws at you what it's going to throw at you, and knowing like I have people around me that I can reach out to who can wrap me in their love and support me to get through what I'm going through. And I don't feel like a burden. I know that I can reach out to them. So I just want to add that it's not just everything's going well, I don't have any problems. It's also knowing I have supports and things that I can draw on when things aren't going great that can help me weather the storm.
Thank you. So with that being said, in defining wellness and emphasizing that it is individualized to everybody, and that I heard both you talk about boundaries and having a support system. How has your either practice and or thoughts around wellness, how have they been impacted since the beginning of COVID?
Janelle, you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah. I, like many other people, I think COVID really threw us for a loop and forced us to sit and pause and be still. And that was uncomfortable for a lot of people, because I think that it highlighted all of the ways in our lives that we avoid having to sit still and what it is that we're avoiding by being still. So, pre-COVID, I would probably tell you that like I did a decent job of self-care. Were there areas that I could improve? Absolutely. But for the most part, I felt like I was cultivating a decent balance with everything that I was doing between school and work and personal life. And then COVID hit and I was like, oh, no, I really actually wasn't. I was really throwing myself into work and school and avoiding some healing that I needed to do, some things that had been tucked away and compartmentalized. But the moment that I had time to slow down and sit and reflect and be with myself, but also get to a point of safety and a certain point in my healing journey where it was safe enough for me to start unpacking some of those things with my own therapists. So COVID definitely made me really think about how I define and look at wellness and whether I'm really living the type of life that I want to lead. I love the work that I do, but I think one thing that COVID has pointed out to me is having better boundaries with work. I think that working from home, while it has its perks, also kind of led to this work creep outside of my normal hours, or always being plugged in or always being available. And I really had to pull back from that and remind myself to implement boundaries and just kind of think about what I am affording my energy to. What am I pouring my energy into? Am I pouring it into things that might make me feel better for the moment? Or am I investing my energy into things that I know will fulfill me for the long run? So it definitely made me rethink wellness and challenge myself to think about what I thought I was doing well, but really I could have been doing better.
So fine tuning your experience around boundaries and wellness. Okay, Brandon, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, so we'll get to this more in like the misconceptions part, but I think COVID showed me two things. One was that wellness is a process, is ever evolving. It's a process, and that what wellness means to you and those targets of wellness change, right? Like they can change. What you need today may not be what you need tomorrow. What you need now may not be what you need in a pandemic. So unlike Janel, I knew I was trash with my self-care, my boundaries. Like I know good and well, like I know I wasn't good. My wife would tell me, my kids would, like everybody knew that I was trash with it. And what COVID did was COVID was like, well, now you don't have a choice. Now you gotta stop. Now you gotta pause. Now you gotta reflect. Now you gotta change. Now you gotta like figure out like what this is now. And now like in wellness, a lot of it too, during that time, especially at the height of it before like we had, the vaccines and things like that we had now. But wellness was also, how is my family, right? How are my kids doing? Like they're separated from their friends. My wife is separated from her friends, her job. Like, how are the people around me? Like if they're good, that's also a level of wellness for me, right? It's also attached to other people, right? In the community. Like, my parents are older. How are they managing? Like they, my dad was essential. He was going in, right? Like he's going in, like, he works for UPS. So he's like, mail not gonna stop. Package is not gonna stop during this. And so like he's doing that. And so like, like figuring out what that was, and really also learning what things mean at different times. So at first it was like, how do we make sure we're insulated, that we're good, that our physical needs are met, that no one's getting sick? Like, how do we manage this? And then now, like I said, being a person that, does like to be around people and does like to engage with people. Like I realize now, like I posted this on Twitter like the other day. I was like, before it was like, I was like, yeah, we got this time. So I was like, go, 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 go. Like I was like, I created the Black Men of Wellness. I was like, during the pandemic, like I'm doing all this other stuff, like putting it up. And now I've realized I'm exhausted. Like this last piece of the pain, like this year, I am exhausted. Like I was like, this summer, I said, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get this together. And then I was like, but I'm gonna take like a week break before I jump back in. That week break turned into 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's been a month and a half. And I promise you the stuff that was there then is still there, because like I couldn't get myself, to the point of doing that. And so I feel like, another piece of wellness is like listening to yourself and your body. My body was like, I need the break. The reason you're not able to get back into it is because you can't. You don't have the threshold to get back into it. And so I think for me, it's been like me trying to like learn a new version of myself, because the old Brandon, I never took a break for a month and a half to do anything, like really. And so now it's like I have to listen to myself, understand where I am, and adjust accordingly.
I want to pivot a little bit because you both reminded me of a few things. I considered myself to be an extrovert before the pandemic, and now that we're in it, I am an aggressive introvert. So I've gone from being a
Yeah.
person who loved and enjoyed being around people. I got a lot of energy being from people, just
Mhm.
having that engagement and that excitement. And now I'm like, okay, what time do I get to go in the house? And
Right.
when is this over? This is cute, but when is this over? I need to go in the house. I need to recharge myself. And thinking about um, the potential and possibility of grieving who I was before the pandemic and who I am now. And we typically think of grieving when it comes to a physical death, but very rarely have we been socialized to think of grieving processes, grieving previous versions of who we used to
Mhm.
be. And so I want to get your thoughts on even managing that. So recognizing the signs of grief when a version of you shed a version of who you are, what that could potentially look like and how to manage that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. And I think it's hard, right? Grief is hard, right? And it does have, I think, like you said, grief, there's grief in the physical, but there's grief of these other things. And I think they have some of the same characteristics. And, for me, it was hard. Like I was, I would agree with you that I feel like I've had a similar path as well. That like, I used to love being out of the house. And now like house is such a safety point for me. Is like when I get there, like I'm good because there's so many other things now and so many other things I'm considering when I'm out with a large group of people. I'm like, because we're COVID cautious and things like that. And so I'm like, how many people are going to be there? What's the proximity? Am I the only one going to be in a mask? Because usually not 99 times out of 100, I'm going to be in one. So like, what does this mean for me? Like, how long should I stay? When should I go? Like, all those other considerations. And I think it's been hard. Like I'm, actively like in that space of grieving like my former levels of productivity, which is now telling me that I'm way too focused on productivity. So
Right.
that was one thing, right, that I didn't really like think about. But I'm like, why do you always feel like your worth is so tied to productivity? And we can talk about capitalist culture and all the other stuff. But
Yes.
that's a piece of it. And I'm like figuring out now, like, trying to even actively like readjust my value system of like, yeah, you didn't
Mhm.
do anything for this past month and a half, but you spent more time with your kids, spent more time with your wife, you actually got to rest, and they've been telling you that you need to do this for a long time. Like you'll get other, residual benefits. And so I think it's like just even adjusting like your own expectations, but it takes a while. Like it takes time to do that. Like I was actually supposed to be in Minnesota this past weekend at a conference, but the
Mhm.
conference is like really large with like thousands of people, and I was supposed to be presenting, and I was like, I wasn't comfortable like with the race going on the flight, and so I actually like canceled and had my co-presenters did it, and like they were posting about it, like I'm seeing all these pictures, and I'm sitting there like I should have just got on that flight, like but like I'm understanding of like, so what's the trade-off? The trade-off is I didn't
Right.
have to worry about my safety. I didn't have
Right.
to worry about bringing anything back to my family.
Right.
Like I didn't have to do all those other things. I didn't have to be there stressed or trying to like avoid people. So it's like thinking about you're grieving one thing, but what are you getting, you know,
Yeah.
on the other side of it?
Yeah. Thank you. Janelle?
For me is that as you're talking about taking a break from social media and all of that, and how you haven't felt productive, I have a post sitting in my Canva right now, ready to go for my Instagram. And I've just been so disconnected from my Instagram that literally says rest is productive. So apparently I'm going to need to post that after this.
Post it so I can like it immediately.
Um, but I used to think the same way in terms of my work and what am I churning out? Like, what are the tangible products that I'm producing? And I've really had to flip that to look at rest being productive, because I've learned if I don't take breaks, my body will take them for me. In terms of getting sick and just like noticing how fewer times I've been sick since the pandemic started, which obviously is partially going to be because of the masks and other precautions that we've been taking. But I think also forcing myself to rest and not constantly going, and allowing my body that physical rest has been really helpful in terms of physical health and well-being. But also really starting to look at pouring into my relationships and having the energy to actually show up in the way that I want to show up in those relationships is productive. Because taking some steps back from other things that I was doing and allowing me to be able to maintain and cultivate different relationships in my life has been so rewarding and fulfilling and eye-opening to me. The ways that I had neglected that or not looked at that as being productive and necessary, just as productive as going to work or whatever it may be. So it's definitely been a mindset shift for my lifestyle.
Thank you both. So we want to get into the nuts and bolts of the conversation around common and not so common misconceptions. So we're going to break it. Well, no, we can actually pull it all together. So some common and not so common misconceptions around what mental health is, what wellness is, and what healing are. And the part of the reason that it's important for us to have these conversations, especially in our community, is because in the age of social media, we have so many Insta therapists and Insta concepts. And these are these quick bites and these quick things about what mental health is and what therapy is and what therapy is not. And are you healing? Where are you on your healing journey? And for a lot of people, they're being introduced to these concepts for the very first time. For some of us who are either in the work or who have been in therapy before, we're familiar with the concepts, but depending on how good your relationship was with your therapist, you may not have like the meat of what these things are. And so we want to talk about it to develop people's understandings around it and to dig a little bit deeper. So in your professional experiences and just watching the world operate the way that it does, what are some common and not so common misconceptions about mental health, about wellness, and about healing?
So before we dive into this, I'd like to put a caveat and disclaimer out there. Please be mindful of who you're getting your mental health information from on the internet.
Yes.
In this day and age, anybody can create a social media account and build a platform. And I've seen huge platforms talking all kinds of nonsense that ranges from like, wow, that's incorrect and superficial and not really going to be helpful to anybody consuming it, to the information this person is putting out can do some real harm. Mm-hmm. So please just vet who you're getting this information from. I think one, making sure someone has the credentials to be talking about what it is that they're talking about. But there are plenty of people also who may not be licensed therapists, but do have a background in this, like Brandon has a background, that are also credible sources that can talk about these things. So I just want to put that disclaimer out before we dive in, because I think that's a big piece of it, of these influencers who make healing an aesthetic, and healing is not always pretty. In fact, a lot of times I would say that it's not. It's uncomfortable. It's not linear. It's not just about looking at who did what to you and deciding whether you're going to make amends with that person or forgive them or whatever it is, it's also looking at yourself and the ways in which you showed up and the behaviors that you've adapted, a lot of times out of survival or necessity for situations that you were in that are no longer helpful to you or the life that you're trying to lead, and that can be toxic or create problems for you at this point in time. It's not lattes and yoga, it's ugly crying, it's apologizing, it's being really uncomfortable and seeking out those parts of yourself that you want to hide because you feel they're so unacceptable or ugly or whatever it is, and getting to know those parts of yourself and welcome them as part of you. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there as we jump into this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in and of itself is a misconception, that like you can find everything you need on your healing journey from Instagram or from TikTok or from Snapchat. Like, I think that's a really good point, which is why it's always, it's good to hear from therapists, and why I bring so many Black therapists like on my platform, is just to have those conversations and make sure that they're safe, right? And so I think, and I'll throw out one, and we can like ping pong it back and forth, but I think one misconception I would say I'll go with around, kind of mental health, is that, people feel like in order to like have good mental health, like that you can't be human, right? That there is a perfection to it, right? Like my mental health is so good that like nothing bothers me.
Don't call me out.
Right. like nothing can make me upset. Like nothing can bother me. I'm never gonna be upset. Like nothing can make me angry anymore. Like, you can try to, gaslight me all you want to. Like you're not gonna be able to get me to this level. And these things that used to bother me like no longer do. Like not gonna cry anymore. I'm not gonna like worry about this. Like that's not realistic. There is a human part to all of us, and our emotions and our feelings are part of that human part of us, right? Those are real things, and things that tell us about ourselves and tell us about emotional attachments and love that we have for certain things or people or places or experiences. Like all of that stuff is valid, right? And is real. There are things like at this point that people close to me could say, like, I'm gonna be upset. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna be upset. Like there are pieces of my life that still hurt, right? And I would say I've been on my, like, I've been actively working with a therapist. When did I first start? 2017, maybe. 17, 16, somewhere around there. And there are still things that bother me, still things that hurt, things that have been happening from then, from that place, that's still on the right day. If it hits me hard enough, like I'm gonna be out. And there are things that still make me upset and things that still make me angry. And like Janel said earlier, the healing part of it is that I know those things. I know that this thing, this topic, this thing hits me in this way. I know that I'm gonna have to do some things to keep myself together, to have those strategies that work for me, to have those people, those resources that work for me, because this thing still stings. It still stings. It still hurts. And so, like, none of us are invincible. None of us are, bigger than any one emotion that we might have. It's about learning, one, that this thing does have this, can generate this reaction for me. And it's because I care about this person. I care about this experience. And so this has the ability to do it. But when I know that when it hits, what can I do to make sure I'm okay? And if it's a recurring thing, what boundaries can I put in place that may help it not happen so frequently or at all? Right. So like those are the pieces of it. And so I feel like that one, I feel like a lot of people, especially in our community, feel like once can't nothing bother me, or I have this impenetrable wall that I'm good. And it's not realistic.
Yeah.
It's not realistic, and it's a trauma response.
Oh.
Yes, I just went there. It is though. That need to protect and insulate yourself so nothing can penetrate is a way of protecting yourself from ever being vulnerable again. But when we shut out any ounce of vulnerability, we are also shutting out the positive aspects that come with vulnerability. So a lot of times when people are really stuck and in the midst of that trauma, we can sometimes feel a sense of numbness or apathy, and that's a self-protection mechanism. But it can also be really hard to find joy and happiness and these pleasant experiences. And so there's this trade-off that we keep coming back to, right? That we keep talking about. If I shut out all of the bad, I may feel numb and that may feel safer for me, but I'm also denying myself all of the other wonderful experiences of being human. And Brandon, as you were talking and you were like, there are things that are gonna upset me, that I'm gonna be angry about or sad or whatever it is. And I just kept thinking, as it should, as it should,
Right.
as it should.
Right.
My job as a therapist, and I get into these like little tussles with other therapists frequently, my job is not to make people adapt better to oppressive or traumatic systems. That's not my job. My job is to help you cope with that, but also recognize like what is coming up and showing up in your body. We've been taught that anger is bad. We should suppress it. We shouldn't act on anger. No, anger for me is justice showing up in your body. It's telling you something is wrong, something is off. I don't deserve this. I deserve better. And so like really getting into touch with that, I think that we've been programmed to think emotions are invalid, they're not useful, they just get in the way. And I think that comes from a culture that prizes or values logic over emotion, but emotion has so much information to go on our intuition, decisions. If something feels off, it's off. Follow that, right? If something's making me angry, like that is information. Did someone violate a boundary of mine? Is this bringing up a past experience and a pain point that I have some healing to do around? Apathy is not the answer.
It sure is not. It is not. I appreciate this part of the conversation, especially because as a Black woman, we are also socialized to think that we're supposed to do it all. We're supposed to be everything to everybody. We put ourselves last on the list, and how that creates resentment for the people who we care for, how it creates like this undercurrent of seething annoyance that we experience regularly. And I obviously am not a Black man, but I know and I love Black men, and thinking about the ways that they have been socialized to be out of touch with their emotions. So the only thing that we immediately recognize with them are anger and happiness. So a Black man can be disappointed, and I might not recognize that that's what it is that he's experiencing. A Black man might be depressed, and I might not realize that that is what it is that he's experiencing, because in my socialization and in their socialization and conditioning, all I can see, oh, he's mad or he's happy. I can't recognize any of those other things with him.
Right.
And be keeping aligned with the idea that wellness is individualized for everybody. The way that emotions show up can be individualized. So, for example, I have experiences with depression, and for me, depression shows up as irritability. But irritability looks like something different to everybody, and so people don't immediately recognize, oh, she's in a depressed state right now because I just look angry. And so I appreciate that. What are some other misconceptions that you've come across in your journey that may be helpful for people to hear and understand?
I have one that you brought up about the strong Black woman schema, and that we are socialized at a very young age to lean into that and be a strong Black woman and to take care of everyone around us, without the expectation of reciprocal care. So when we're going through it, we don't expect those around us to rally around us the way that we rally around and carry them. And we're also generally socialized to take care of other people to the detriment of our own well-being.
Mhm.
And I think that shows up also in people's expectations of access to Black women's labor, which is a whole other conversation. I won't get on that soapbox. But we often wear the strong Black woman schema as a badge of honor. Like, yes, I am a strong Black woman. I don't need anybody. And I am also here to tell you that hyper independence is also a trauma symptom, can be, right? But not to mention that there's a lot of research that is coming out that taking on this coping style actually has deleterious effects for our health. It makes us lonely, it strains our relationships, it predisposes us to depression, anxiety, not being able to reach out when we are going through something, to suicidal ideation, to not even being able to recognize that I am experiencing depression or anxiety or trauma. So again, we just keep coming back to this theme of trade-offs of when I make a decision to cope in a certain way or show up in a certain way, what am I trading off? What am I predisposing myself to that might not be as beneficial, or might be an unintended consequence of me
Right.
up in that way?
Right.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And since you are all talking about, we brought up both sides about the things that are impacting Black women, and I'll jump and talk a bit about Black men, and I think for us, and so like I had been doing a lot of stuff around. There were a lot of high profile death by suicides with Black males a few months ago, with a number of them that were, Regina King's son, and there was a mayor in Hyattsville and some others. And so, we got on this conversation about like what are some of the things like around that. And I think a misconception for Black men is that, us being vulnerable or being in tune with our, having emotional intelligence is a sign of weakness, right? Like that you're less of a man for feeling that. And some of that stuff sounds like it's outdated, like, oh, we're coming out of that. We're not. Like that still has a stronghold on us as a community where, to the point, like you said, like, happiness and anger, like we deal with anger as Black men because we're like, there's something that we're comfortable with. We're learned to taught it because when we're younger, we can't cry, we can't be soft, we can't be weak. You can't get upset about, a lot of us get told like in romantic relationships, if something happens with a girl, like forget it, like that's go get another one, like you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like all those kind of things, like you're not even allowed to unpack anything unless it's anger. And then if it's anger, then we're taught like, yeah, like, whatever you got to do to deal with that, go ahead and do it. Like you gotta hit somebody, you gotta hit somebody. And not saying we all had that, but these are overarching themes and things that permeate through our communities. And so like, as for Black men, like I, definitely tell, brothers and other Black men, like, go and take the time to like learn yourself, like learn what makes you upset, what makes you sad. And I think a lot of it is like, there's a fear there. Like some of it may be, rooted in, a previous trauma or maybe rooted in other things. And so we don't want to unpack it because we might not even like ourselves after we figure it out. Like we're like, dang, I was so all this time they were trying to tell me not to be soft, and now I'm soft. Like what happened?
Right.
So it's like, but it that's a necessary part of the healing process. Learning yourself learning, why we do the things we do, why we, think the way we think, and understand that there are some things that, we all have those soft spots. We have some things that, people are like, oh, that would never bother me. And then you're thinking about it and you're like, that I'd be miserable. So that happened to
Right.
me. Someone said that to me. And I think as Black men, it's important for us to kind of do that work. And, it's so important to get connected to the Janels of the world and really find those safe spaces, like to really unpack those things, because we learn so much. And then you're like, now I know how to start to deal with this. Like I can kind of put what this is into a corner and not just have to respond with this anger, and be able to put up those things, like understand those boundaries. And so I definitely think for us Black men, I think that's another one.
I acknowledge that we have a comment in the chat from Robert. And Robert says, a misconception as a Black man is to be the strong person with unlimited reserve of energy. We get tired too, and we need to take care of ourselves. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to listen to ourselves and our bodies and what our bodies are telling us, because our body tells us when we need to sit our butts down and rest. And a lot of times we catch ourselves ignoring those signs. Um, and that can end up looking like burnout, that can look like physical injury, illness, whatever it may be. We're not superhuman.
Right.
You have a limited reserve of energy, and we need to honor that.
Yeah.
And Brandon, as you were talking, it brought me back to your comments on grief. And I think healing can feel scary or daunting to a lot of people, because what if through my journey I do find out that like I really don't like certain parts of myself? We all have them. We all have them. And it's not something to be afraid of. We should embrace them. They're not the totality of us. They're just a part of us. But I think that grief piece is so important there, because in your healing journey, you will eventually come to a place where things are better. You have healed certain traumas or past experiences, and things start to feel better. And you kind of sit and reflect, and think back about, wow, I wish that I could have had this years ago.
Yeah.
That time that has passed, that I could have been so much more present or just in a completely different space. And the grief that comes from that realization, it hits you.
Yes.
It's hard.
Oh my goodness, yes. I think that I love that you said that you both are talking about healing in terms of it being a process and not necessarily an ends to the means, and how it is ongoing, it is lifelong, because we gather up experiences as we go. So from the moment that we enter into this existence, we're gathering, we're interacting with people, things hurt, things sting, things traumatize. Life does and can do all of these different things. And so therapy and our own understanding of wellness, mental health, and those things are tools that we can use to help us along the way. Some of those things, you can use a spoon to dig out. Some things you need a shovel. Some things you need whatever that big machine is that digs up the street. Like, it's, depending on what's happening in your life. And it does get better. It absolutely gets better, especially when you have a therapist who is able to help you along in your process. One of the biggest, for me, that I found misconceptions around healing and wellness is that any therapist will do. And so I want to get your thoughts about what you want people to know and understand when it's time to find a therapist, because we think, oh, I'm gonna spin this wheel, it's gonna land on this person, I'm gonna call them and schedule an appointment, and then I'm be healing all my issues and stuff. And so, can you talk about that process of finding a therapist and what that looks like and what some of the holes could look like?
Yeah. So no, no, that doesn't work. And I think in a lot of places in our lives, that logic doesn't work, and we wouldn't apply that logic. If I'm baking a recipe and it calls for a specific ingredient, not any old ingredient is going to do to substitute it with, right? So if I need a doctor for diabetes, I'm not going to go to an OBGYN or a neurologist. I'm going to go to someone who specializes in treating diabetes. So I think that's the first thing, is finding someone who actually specializes in treating what it is you need help healing with. Then there's finding someone who you vibe with. The therapeutic relationship is the most important factor in healing. You could have the most talented therapist, pioneer who created the therapy treatment themselves. It does not matter if you do not have a solid therapeutic relationship with them. You're not going to get work done because you're not going to feel safe. You're not going to be able to be vulnerable. You're not going to be able to open up and be honest about what it is that you're trying to heal. Now, I will say that that takes time. There are some clients that I've worked with where it's taken 9 months to a year to like really them feel comfortable to allow me to see parts of themselves that they won't show anyone. So I think it's also important to be able to discern between, we just don't have a good relationship, versus I've been through some things that really make it difficult for me to trust and open up to someone. And so that process may take some time. And I think those things feel different, and you can make your decision or kind of figure out which one it is by paying attention to what's showing up in your body in that moment when you're with that therapist. I think there are other things to look for. I think for a lot of us, it's important to have a therapist who looks like us, who understands our experience of what it means to show up and live and be Black in this world. And I'll add that, unfortunately, there's a huge gap with the need of our community for therapy and the number of Black therapists that are available.
Yeah.
So it's not always possible to get in with a Black therapist. A lot of us have really long waiting lists, especially depending on our specialty. So there are other therapists, whether they're other therapists of color or even white therapists, who have done their work,
Right.
who do good work with folks from our community. So I think those are some things to keep in mind as you're shopping for a therapist, and interview them, reach out to multiple therapists, have some questions about their approach and their experience that you want to know that are important to you. For some folks, it might be like, how do you handle when someone tells you that they're thinking about suicide, or do you call the cops as an intervention for people who are thinking about suicide? Or what is your experience in working with Black people? What training have you done? Where are you on an anti-racist journey, or things like that? What is important to you for you and your safety in that room that you need to know, and interview them?
For people who are being introduced to therapy for the very first time, I also know that there is this assumption that the therapist is the one who gets to determine whether or not they continue with the relationship, because there's a perceived power dynamic. And what do you say to speak to that?
that relationship is just as much yours as it is the therapist. It is your co-relationship. I would encourage, there are certain things that might come up during therapy that might not sit the right way or might rub you a wrong way. And that can be an opportunity to learn how to work through conflict without throwing a relationship away. So a lot of therapy too is just learning what it means to be in a healthy relationship and how to navigate conflict and all of these other things that happen in relationships to strengthen the relationship. Now, there are some things that are really egregious and warrant you ghosting a therapist or reporting them. I hope that that doesn't happen to anyone watching this, but I think sometimes people also forget that even though we may be friendly with our clients, we're not friends. We are there to push you and point out things to you that might be uncomfortable to hear or think about. And that can be a not great feeling when it happens, but it's also an opportunity to process and bring that up with a therapist and take up space and learn how to do that in your relationships outside of the therapy room.
Brandon, do you have anything that you want to add from your personal experience engaging with therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I think Janel really like knocked it out the park with the things that she was talking about, like what that therapeutic, relationship means. And for me, my therapist is a Black woman. Been, with her for a long time at this point. And, you know, we've had, it's just like any other relationship, like we've had times and certain things where I feel like we've executed well. We've had some bumpy spots too, where it was like, I felt like I wasn't quite getting like exactly what I needed, but because our relationship was where it was, I could say that to her and not, go and find another one. But there are cases where you do, right? There are cases where you need to, as Janel said. So I would say the biggest thing for me is to tell people, like, just don't give up on therapy as a whole. Even if the first one you found wasn't a right fit for you, you didn't mesh well, like, don't give up on, therapy per se. You may just need a different one. I think we've all gone to, I mean, before we even go to other physicians, like we've all had other relationships that didn't work out. Right. It doesn't mean you're like, I'm never getting in a relationship again. I'm never going to have a friend again because this person violated something. You understand that this, there were some things that didn't quite, mesh. And there were some parts of me that I needed to be addressed specifically that they may not have been comfortable with or equipped to deal with. And that's totally fine. So I would say, like, continue to go for that. As you now said, there's definitely a lot of wait lists for our therapists, which is a good and bad thing. I mean, historically, there have been barriers to our people being able to get, licenses and things like that. And that's another topic. But, there are more coming. And so, like, trying to get connected to those places. Black Mental Health Alliance helps individuals get connected to Black therapists. There's therapy for Black men, Black girls, Black kids. Like, there are a ton of other initiatives right now, like trying to help people get connected. So like reach out and tap into those as much as possible. It can be frustrating, with affordability, who takes insurance, which, therapists don't. And I'm sure Janel could really go a whole other hour about why some therapists take insurance, why some don't, all the other complexities of those things. And but try to stick with it as much as possible. I've just been hearing and been around people so much more recently talking about the benefits that they've had personally of going to see a therapist, particularly one that looks like them, as Janel said, that they've been able to, really get into some things, Black men, Black women, Black children. I mean, like it's, I think the pandemic, for as wild and as brutal as it's been, it's starting to have this conversation and more, and people are starting to tap in, to that and being cognizant of that. So I think that's my biggest piece, is just, try to stick with it as much as possible.
What are some things that people should, and Janel's question is for you. Absolutely should not wait. So, obviously, if I'm okay today and, I contact the therapist tomorrow and they tell me that they have a 4-week waiting list before I can get an appointment, that's fine. When are times that people should not wait? And what are some of the things that they should not wait around? So,
Yeah, if you're thinking about ending your life, that's definitely not something to wait on. That can be a really, really powerful crisis point. And so if you're not able to get in with someone within a couple of days, you want to reach out to your local crisis center, crisis hotline, or go to the emergency department. If you're having thoughts about harming someone else, I would say that's another crisis. And you should not wait. If things are really severe, if you're having a really hard time, if you can't get out of bed, if you're not going to school or you're not going to work, if you're completely isolating yourself from people around you, you're not able to take care of yourself, like get up and make meals or take care of your personal hygiene and things like that, then you probably want to get in with someone sooner rather than later.
And what are some things that you can suggest if we notice that for people around us? Because we can't make people around us go to therapy. What are some things that we can do when we notice those things with people that we care about?
I like to point out to people what I notice. So I'll reach out and just be like, hey, like, I haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing? And kind of let that open the door. And then maybe I'll be like, hey, like, I've noticed that you haven't been coming to our, I don't know, you haven't been coming to church on Sunday. You haven't been here the last several weeks. You come every week. Is everything okay? Can I bring you a meal? Like, can I run and pick up groceries for you? I think it's also important to remember that healing can happen in the community too. So healing happens in therapy. And I think therapy is a necessary piece for a lot of us, but healing's also happening in the community too. And that's just as necessary and important. So finding and connecting them with different things that are healing. If there's a group in the community, or just maybe there's like a group of moms that get together and they go out and they walk around the park or whatever every Monday or something. Finding and connecting them with things like that, I think can be really helpful. Brandon, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like just also, being patient, right? And being, a safe space to land. So like when you're noticing those things and they're, having struggles with it, I think, saying like, if today's not today, if you don't want to talk about it today, like I'm here, right? Like not with the forceful, I think like we don't want people to think therapy is a punishment, right? So like,
Yeah.
they've, done something and it's like, well, you need to be going to see a therapist. But, like that tone is probably not going to make someone go like, they're right. But just, trying to, I know it's cliche, but like plant those seeds, right? Like and putting that in there. And, sometimes it's also modeling, right? So if it's like, hey, you're telling somebody to do something that you may not have done, like sometimes, just to be able to say it brings that, added level of authenticity sometimes, when you're like, hey, like I've gone, like it's helpful, like I can help you. And that's another thing, helping someone find a therapist. Sometimes they may not have the energy to do it. Like, I'm in this place, I'm upset. Everything's like Janel said earlier, life is life and it's not really working. So like I can't even sit here and go through Google. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't
Right.
know what I'm supposed to be like, who I'm supposed to reach out to. I'm supposed to call this person got a wait list and this person got a wait list. So I keep calling, like all those kind of things, like being a part of the process of just like, hey, if you don't have it, today, like if you're tired, you want to just rest, I can look up some people, I can make some calls to see who's, taking, taking new clients. Like, I think it's definitely, a benefit there to get people to see like, oh man, this person, like they care. Like they're not saying this because I made them upset. Like they're saying this because like they care. They want me to get something from this. And I think especially, I think too, with men also, I think that helps too. Like just trying to guide that in and not it being a punitive thing, right? And it's just like, dang, like this is something you need to do because you're broken, right? Of just like
Right.
something that could be a resource for you.
Yeah. Erica's comment, don't make it like you need to go to therapy. We definitely treat therapy like a sentence getting handed down. And it's true. And it's even unfortunately started to become like an insult people go to of like, you need therapy, like something's not right with you, and entirely unhelpful. I like to frame it as you deserve to have a space where you can go every week or every other week, where that space is yours and yours entirely. And you have someone who's just devoted to being there with you for 45 minutes or an hour to process whatever it is that you need to process. Everyone deserves to have that.
I love that.
Yeah, we do. We deserve to have that, to be able to take up space. I think we're socialized a lot of the times to not be seen or heard and just stay out of the way. But we all deserve to take up space. Therapy isn't a punishment. It's not a sentence. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It may mean that you're hurt and you have some healing to do, but you're not broken.
Yeah. And like all good things, we can commodify and weaponize things that are helpful to us. Erica said her 20-year-old just said, oh, I can't get to the.
Yes, happy people should also be in therapy, just talk and process their experiences. Yes.
Absolutely.
You do not have to wait for something horrible to happen to you to go to therapy.
And we shouldn't wait, as best we can.
Right.
Having that relationship that's established already and building a rapport with a professional. That way, when something does happen, because life is going to life, we already have somebody there who is ready to listen to us and to help us process that.
Proactive and not reactive.
Absolutely. And it might help us find some things that maybe aren't crises or whatever, but if we leave them unattended long enough, they can grow and become a problem.
Right.
So we can get ahead of it instead of waiting to the point where we don't have the energy to look at therapists or whatever. I think the other piece that people tend to get stuck on is being worried about offending someone. Like, I don't want to reach out and say something if they're not depressed or whatever the case may be. And one, I think we need to stop looking at mental health as being something negative or something wrong or deficit. It's something that we all have. But also, like, I would rather run the risk of maybe offending you in the moment, but you ultimately getting the support that you need and you being here and still being alive than me not saying anything and just letting whatever it is fester and tear you down. So a personal experience I have with that is when I was going through the hellish process of getting licensed as a therapist. They make you take all these tests, pay all this money and everything. And I was stressed. I was studying and just, it was not a fun process. And one night I had like texted the person that I share an office with, and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know I haven't been the greatest friend lately, but I just want to let you know I really appreciate you and your friendship for me. And they texted me back and they were like, are you okay? Like, do I need to call someone? Because they took that as me, like making amends of like, okay, I'm gonna wrap up all these loose ends. I'm out.
Get out of here.
It really was just a moment of clarity for me and all of the madness that was getting licensed of like, ooh, I really have not been showing up in a way that's consistent with how I want to carry myself. And I want to acknowledge that for my friend. But I was not offended in the slightest. I was
Right.
actually like, wow. So in the future, if I am going through something, at least I know that I can go to her and have these conversations. Like, I do need support. I do need you to do this for me if you have the spoons or the capacity to help. So that's my philosophy on it. I know a lot of people may not feel the same way, but yeah, I'd rather run the risk of maybe offending you and you still be here than not saying anything at all.
Janelle, if people are interested in connecting with you, either for services or for referrals to colleagues in your field, what's the best way for people to contact you?
So if they are interested in referrals, so I do have a wait list, but happy to share referrals with some other colleagues in the space. You can go to my website, ubuntuhealing.org. That's UBUNTU healing.org. There's my email address is on there. You can get in contact with me. Let me know just topic wise, like, oh, I want help with depression or processing a traumatic event or anxiety. I have Cigna, Blue Cross, Johns Hopkins insurance, or I don't have insurance, I need sliding scale. And whether or not you're cool with telehealth, and I will help. I'll send you over the folks that I know that meet those criteria that you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you. Brandon, you mentioned a network that you have that you've created. Can you tell people how to find and connect to your network?
We are on YouTube. So if you just type in the Black Mental Wellness Lounge, you'll find us. We got the only one with that name on there. And so, yeah, so like at this point, I think it's like 43 videos, 44 videos just dedicated specifically to us and our healing. Like I said, check out the episode that I did with Janel. There are other, we touched on a number of topics: faith in mental health, Black men. We did a roundtable with Black men talking about mental health. And I have an episode specifically on Black women's mental health coming out probably the end of next week or early the week after. So we do stuff with kids. I mean, it's anything. We're trying to cover so many different topics. And but yeah, definitely subscribe and stay tapped in.
You have Insta too, right?
I do. Yes. Thank you, Janelle. That's why it's good to have friends in these spaces. So if you look up Black Mental Wellness Lounge on Instagram, you'll be able to follow us there. We post new videos. We post other people's stuff. Like, we just stay tapped into Black mental health. And I'm on Twitter at Brand, BRAN J Johnson, the #1 on Twitter.
Yeah. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok at the Tattooed Counselor. So I post information on mental health, trauma, all kinds of stuff on there. So
awesome. Thank you both for spending the Ceasefire Sunday afternoon with me. I really appreciate your wisdom, your experience, and your advice, and just the opportunity to give our listeners one more chance to get information about healing, so that they could potentially move forward with getting some help. So thank you both.
thanks.
And thank you for everybody who joined us, for spending this hour with us. We're gonna probably post this to the Baltimore Ceasefire the Baltimore Ceasefire YouTube page, and figure out how to make it accessible to different people across the internet. So thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.